Okay, so good afternoon. I think you're well fed for us to take a deep dive into the maritime scape, as we say. So, this is an interesting thematic session. It talks about sea power and security, India's strategic posture in a shifting Indo Pacific profile. Now, let's try and understand what's happening in the Indo Pacific. Firstly, it is a concept that is upon us, but at the end of the day, it still remains an artificial concept. For the simple reason, the way in which geography has been ordained, the oceans are separate from each other. And oceans strategically have never been seen as part of a continuum. But that's where I said in my, in the intervention in the morning, that one of the things that is happening in statecraft today is what we call as cartographic reimagination of geography. So the same geography that is given to you and made for you to understand as ordained, you can't do anything with it. It's immutable geography. That geography is now being reinvented, reimagined, and being looked very differently. And one of the fundamental underpinnings is to look at two oceans that matter very much as part of strategic center of gravity, as not two separate theaters, but as one conjoined continuum. But having said that, in real terms, are they really conjoined and are they similar to each other? Is it a continuum? For example, when you look at the Pacific, the first thing that comes up to any strategic analyst is it's a very militarized theater. Deep disputes, deep conflicts, which can conflagrate at any point in time. There used to be the situation of the South China Sea. Of course, it's now been tamed because they've chosen to kind of go conciliatory. But there was a time when the South China Sea dispute could have actually boiled over. We still don't know what's going to happen with the cross straits, with Taiwan. We still don't know what's going to happen with the Philippines. The North Korea situation still remains a powder keg. So it's a highly militarized theater. It is also a theater where there is a lot of deterrence mechanisms. So trying to deter the other. So you have militarized situations and then you have counter military mechanisms. You compare this with the Indian Ocean, it's benign, at least for now, it's beneficent, it lacks any kind of security order or security architecture, and therefore it's really very, very placid. However, in both these theaters, there's one fundamental underpinning, and that is the stellar rise of China. So while China remains quite dominant in the Pacific and is getting more and more dominant because it wants to dominate its immediate periphery, it is the role that China is playing and is going to play in the Indian Ocean over the next, let's say, 2 decades that has got to disconcert India. Because if we lose the opportunity to shape the periphery, our maritime periphery, the way we understand it to be, we will be forced to play catch up. So that's a point we must remember. Now, for the last 11 years, we've had a dispensation in Delhi that looks at the maritime domain and the maritime realm very differently. So I had mentioned Sagar in 2015, which was, of course, announced with a lot of fanfare. But if you see from 2015, what India has been trying to do is basically try to achieve what we call as the 5 S's and the 3 C's. I'm taking off from where my good friend Prateep left off. Okay, 5 S's and 3 C's. But these are not mine. I'm just telling you how this government has shaped its framework in this. So what are the 5 S's? The first S is what they call as samvad or dialogue. So our maritime dialogue processes have really gone through the roof, and what we call as maritime socialization. The other word for maritime diplomacy is maritime socialization. We see that there are more than 45 countries now in the Indo-Pacific with whom India has some form of maritime socialization in the diplomatic space, including with a country like New Zealand, which in times gone by we would have thought, what is the importance of New Zealand? But we engage with New Zealand as well. So that's samvad. The second S is sahyog, cooperation. And when does cooperation come? Cooperation comes when you think of problems as being common, and therefore your approach is consensual, your approach is collegial, your approach is collective. Sahyog doesn't come when the relationship is asymmetrical or when the stronger power is looking to assert its power. Of course, that doesn't mean that India doesn't assert power, But we've tried to create frameworks in our own region. And one of them, of course, is to revive BIMSTEC, which we did in 2016 at the summit, at the BRICS summit in Goa, and then continued in 2018. And I've tried to revive it because it is basically a Bay of Bengal initiative, a maritime initiative, an economic initiative, and a regional cooperation initiative. But it's not limited only to that. When Prime Minister Modi went for the Pacific Island Forum Summit in late 2014 and then hosted his own in Jaipur in 2015, the Prime Minister was on record to say something which now has been lapped up by other interlocutors as well. He told these small island developing states from the Pacific, you might be small in terms of size, but don't see yourself as small island states, see yourselves as large ocean states. It's just a matter of perspective. Now, that does not mean that a Fiji or a Tuvalu or a Solomon Islands is going to become equal to China. But if you want to assert yourself in any meaningful way, if you start seeing yourself only as small island states, then you will find yourself desperate at all times. You will find yourselves all the time looking to be dependent on somebody, and that dependency is going to drive you into subjugation. So our Sahyog that we have been launching, and I'll give you a few initiatives, is not based on the asymmetry of power. It's based on the understanding that what we have are common threats, and common threats require common solutions. So in 2019, at the East Asia Summit in Bangkok, we took the lead in unveiling what is called as the IPOI, the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. Nobody has this kind of initiative, not the Americans, not the Chinese, nobody. Now, what is this initiative? Firstly, it's not an initiative run by India. It's not our ownership. We want it to be owned by anybody who's willing to own it. So we said this is multi-actor, multi-stakeholder collaboration. And what does it actually mean? It simply means while we should be harnessing our ocean wealth to the optimum, the harnessing of ocean wealth must not forget that we also have to harness it responsibly. Because our maritime culture and our civilizational culture tells us that everything should be seen in harmony. In 2018, at the G20 in Buenos Aires, when Guterres, the UN Secretary General, met with Prime Minister Modi, he complimented Prime Minister Modi for taking up the leadership on climate action. So Prime Minister Modi told him with all humility that we are not doing this for bragging rights. We are doing this because we are trying to recreate our civilizational splendor, where the abiding lesson was always live in sync with ecology and harmony. So the maritime ecology remains probably one of the most critical ecologies of any ecosystem. But what it shows you is we have not limited it only to the IPOI. With France, we have been able to establish what is called as the International Solar Alliance in 2017, that, by the way, has a maritime dimension to it. Because the solar power capturing will be then transmitted through high direct voltage currents from the bottom of the sea, the way cables now exist at the bottom of the sea. So there's a maritime domain to it. We got together with the United States to set up something called as a CDRI, which is Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Which hegemonic power in the region thinks in terms of disaster resilient infrastructure of smaller nations? But we have done that. And this is actually applicable to island states. As I said about IPOI. With UK, we have set up what is called as the Infrastructure Resilient Island States Initiative in areas which were former colonies of the British. So what does it show you here? It not only shows you that ideationally speaking, India looks at the maritime domain in very different ways, but also India has a lot of equity of acceptability. In each of these initiatives, our co-chartered partner is different. From France to UK to countries of the Indo-Pacific to the US. The third one is security. And how do we look at security? The world looks at security in terms of transactionalism. When Paraguay asked China for vaccines, saying we want vaccines, the Chinese told him, absolutely, our heart bleeds for you. Anyway, we are red, so our blood is also red. The only thing is it bleeds well if you withdraw recognition from Taiwan. And they said, even at this time, you're putting them, said, can't do it, we can't do anything. You withdraw from Taiwan, next minute you will have the vaccines. They reached out to Taiwan. Taiwan said, we are in the same boat, we don't have the vaccines. we'll ask India. So Jaishankar was asked, this is an actual story which I'm privy to. He told Prime Minister Modi the importance of Paraguay. 50,000 vaccines were sent on an Air India Express charter flight to Asuncion. The Paraguayans have become our best friends. And recently Santiago Peña was in Delhi, and one of the deals signed was, he said, look, you can actually address your food security through us. We can be the sluice gates for your food security. We are a country of 10 million which can produce food for 100 million. My point is, this is part of security. Security is not only military security. Security is understanding holistic security. Human security, economic security, health security, food security, energy security, non-traditional securities at sea, which we call good order at sea, and of course then the conventional military. The fourth aspect is in terms of prosperity. Now, when we look at prosperity, we don't look at it as wealth. We look at it as well-being, societal well-being. So all our initiatives in the region that have been run in keeping with the well-being of the society. And I'll give you a maritime example. Pradeep had mentioned this. When Prime Minister Modi became Prime Minister, one of the things was, as he mentioned, there was this ICJ ruling on maritime boundary delimitation between India and Bangladesh. The case went against us. Did we do a China on Philippines? You think we couldn't have done a China on Philippines? When Philippines got it on Scarborough Shoals, you know what the Chinese said? They said, we don't care a damn. We cock a snook at international law. We could have done the same. What would have Bangladesh would have done? This was Sheikh Hasina's Bangladesh. But we recognize two things. One, international law. When we say we respect international law, a case may go against us. The important thing is to respect law, because then you will get cooperation from the other side. And I remember no less than Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg, who was here for Raisina, and she was delivering the inaugural address. This is Norway. What India did in the Bay of Bengal resonated as far as the Nordics. That you had Prime Minister Solberg say, India is cut from the rest. We have never seen a powerful country be so respectful of international law. And that's how you have to forge your well-being. And the last S is in terms of Sabhyata and Sanskriti. Now, we've talked a lot about maritime culture. Enhancing the maritime Sabhyata of the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific is as important as delivering tangible goods. Because one thing is to provide public goods, and the other is to have a public goodwill image in society. And when it comes to Sabhyata and Sanskriti, we've been able to provide our best traditions. We also have 3 C's, which I'm quickly going through, and then I'm yielding the floor to our distinguished panelists. The 3 C's are connectivity. We want to shape maritime connectivity in such a manner that it does not make countries supplicants to the person promoting that particular trajectory. And therefore, all our trajectories, whether it is the Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor, whether it's the INSTC, whether it's IMEC, all of them are essentially meant to be collegial, consultative. And one of the principles that India has taken up is, and that's why there have been very few examples of an Indian project being negated when governments change, including in the Maldives, including in Sri Lanka, because there is political acceptability behind those projects. It is not like what happens to China many times, and then China has to again use many of its weaponization tricks to bring those countries back on track. So connectivity. The second is commerce. And you have to protect your commerce, because India is the only country that has the Indo-Pacific wingspan on commerce. Just give you 2 data points. 50% of India's export GDP moves east. And so the east is existential from an economic point of view for us. But close to 20% of our import-export moves through the Red Sea. So while the east is important, the eastern vector is important, for us, maintaining free, open and inclusive sea lanes of communication through the Red Sea remains equally important. And that explains why we are part of the Combined Task Force 150, 151, 52, 53 and 54. And the last C is about culture. Now here I don't mean culture as in, engagement. Norms, respect for norms. And here you have the Chinese way and the Indian way. The Indian way is to be a norm entrepreneur. So we are looking at norms, and we're looking to build respect for norms with countries who are willing to associate with us. And the IPOI is one such norm building exercise. On the other side, and I like to use this word, so I often use this word, norm entrepreneur, which is India, versus China being an exponent of entrepreneurial norms. Meaning what? For them, the project is the norm. So if they decide to impose a bridge on you, that's the norm. They say, look, they need a bridge. Who told you? No, I only told them. Who pays for it? They. Have they agreed to it? Doesn't matter. So you have that kind of a norm setting. Impose a project and then make it the norm. And you have the Indian democratic way, which is to build respect for norms, and then your project flows thereafter. Thank you.